Your sister is everything. You're not disciplined, accomplished, self-sufficient. My father, Richard, raised his wineglass toward Emma across the candlelit dining table. We were seated in the familiar dining room of our family home in Portland, Oregon, where judgment was often served before dessert. Emma's smile was radiant, bathed in warm candlelight and smug satisfaction. She basked in his praise like it was her birthright. She looked impeccable, as always. Designer blouse, elegant jewelry, every detail carefully curated to project success. To Richard, she was the perfect daughter who had clawed her way to the top. She built a career, owns her own place, drives a luxury car, he continued, barely glancing in my direction. Unlike your little computer projects, I kept my eyes on the plate, slicing my roasted chicken with mechanical precision. After 2 years of these family dinners, I'd learned that silence was easier than confrontation. Every gathering followed the same script, tortured, glorifying Emma's curated life, while belittling mine as meaningless tinkering. She's running a team in retail management. That's real money, real responsibility, he added, shooting me a pointed look. Not like you, sitting at home playing with tech all day. Emma leaned back in her seat, the comparison clearly flattering. Thanks, Dad. I've worked hard for my independence. It feels amazing not needing anyone. I nearly choked on my water. Not needing anyone. The same woman who'd pleaded for a $4,000 bailout just last week. Well, I said quietly, setting down my fork, I guess she won't need my monthly $4,000 support anymore. The words sliced through the room like a sudden drop in temperature. Emma's smile vanished. Richard's expression shifted from amused to confused. What did you just say? I said, I repeated, calmly. Emma can stop relying on me for money now that she's so successful. Her face went pale, her lips parted in shock, but no words came. 2 years she'd spent building a fantasy, crafting promotions and salaries that only existed in her stories and in Richard's proud retellings to friends and colleagues. And now, the lie was unraveling with one sentence. Lucy, Emma hissed, her voice trembling, we agreed to keep that private. Keep what private? Richard's voice rose with suspicion as he looked between us. The air shifted. Tension curled around the chandelier like smoke. I could see Emma doing mental gymnastics, trying to weigh how much she could still salvage, but there was no coming back. For 2 years, I'd endured his dismissive remarks, listened to him glorify her while mocking everything I'd built. Tonight, I wasn't swallowing it anymore. I'm Lucy Grant, 33 years old. For the last 5 years, I've been running a successful e-commerce company from my 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Portland. What they dismissed as playing with computers was, in fact, a business called Timbertrail Outfitters, an online store for high-quality outdoor gear. It started as a side hustle. Now, it's a powerhouse. I source top-tier camping and hiking products from vetted manufacturers across the U.S., and I sell them through my website, Amazon, and a handful of niche platforms. Last year, my company brought in $820,000 in gross revenue. My profit margins are excellent, my customer reviews, stellar. But none of that ever mattered to my father. Because I didn't wear suits or drive a flashy car, he assumed I was failing. Emma, on the other hand, always lived for the optics. At 29, she manages a boutique clothing store in the Pearl District, making roughly $47,000 a year. A decent job, but not the executive role Richard thinks she holds. 2 years ago, she showed up at my door crying, drowning in credit card debt, terrified of losing her apartment, her car, her image. I'll pay you back. I just need a little time, she begged. Dad can't know I'm struggling. And the older sister felt obligated. I agreed to cover her shortfalls. $4,000 a month. Every month. I thought I was helping her stay afloat, while she figured things out. But instead of scaling back, she doubled down. She moved into a pricier loft, bought more designer clothes, and turned her social media into a billboard for a life she wasn't earning. She became the poster child for success funded entirely by me. At every family event, Richard would compare us. Emma is driven. Emma is responsible. Lucy needs a real job. And she would nod along, soaking in the praise, never once correcting him, never once acknowledging who was really paying for that lifestyle. She got comfortable in the lie. Too comfortable. Tonight's dinner was supposed to celebrate yet another fictitious promotion. Instead, it became the reckoning. The truth, long buried beneath layers of image and illusion, finally surfaced. Richard stared at me now, eyes narrowed. Lucy, What do you mean by monthly transfers? I didn't blink. 4 grand. Every month, for 2 years. That's $96,000 I've sent to Emmett to cover rent, her car lease, her spending, all of it. His face changed color. Disbelief gave way to realization, and realization to fury. That can't be right. Emma makes good money. She makes 47 grand a year, I said. Enough for a modest life. Not the one she's been faking. Emma was crying now. Lucy, please, stop. But I wasn't protecting her anymore. Her rent alone is $2,700. Car payment, $650. Then there's insurance, utilities, credit card minimums. She's been short by about 4 grand every single month. Richard looked at Emma like he was seeing her for the first time. Is this true? Her mascara was streaking, her voice cracked. I was going to pay her back, but we all knew she wouldn't. I just needed more time, Emma muttered, eyes downcast. To get established. Established in what? Richard demanded, his voice sharp. Didn't you tell me you were promoted to district manager? I manage 3 associates at the store, she confessed. It's not a district. The truth spilled from her like a slow leak, and there was no patching it now. For 2 years, Emma had fed Richard a fantasy, a rising star in retail, salary bumps, promotions that never happened, and he repeated every word like gospel, proudly telling everyone his youngest was thriving. So I've been walking around telling the world how independent and accomplished you are. Richard's voice cracked as it climbed. While you've been living off your sister. It wasn't charity, she said weakly. It was a loan. A loan, I interjected, with no terms, no interest, and no timeline. A loan you never once mentioned while letting Dad paint me as the family failure. Richard turned to me, and for the first time, there was no judgment in his eyes, no irritation, just something closer to realization. Shame. How much do you actually make with this business of yours? He asked, softer now. I hadn't planned to share the numbers, but this moment felt like the breaking of something old and the beginning of something new. Last year, Timber Trail grossed $820,000. After expenses, I cleared about $440,000. The number hit him like a punch. He sank into his chair, his face drained of color. Emma was sobbing now, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. Her polished world was disintegrating. Richard's wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the plate. No one moved. The sound just lingered. 820,000, he echoed, dazed. Gross, I clarified. Net profit was around 440. Emma was gasping now, breath hitching with panic. Lucy, you can't cut me off. Rent's due in 5 days. I've got bills, credit cards, my gym. Maybe you should have thought about that, I said evenly, unlocking my phone. Before you spent 2 years letting Dad think I was the failure. I opened my banking app, scrolled to the scheduled payments, and with a single tap, ended the $4,000 monthly transfer that had propped up her fantasy. I held out the screen for her to see. Transfer cancelled. Richard stared at me like I'd sprouted wings. You've made more in 1 year than I did in 5 as a school principal, he said. And I've been sitting here lecturing you about being responsible. You never asked, I said. You assumed that, because I work from home, I wasn't working at all. Emma's chair screeched back as she stood, panic flooding her voice. Dad, you have to make her help me. I'll lose everything. Sit down, Emma, Richard said, voice cutting. You've lied to me for 2 years. I didn't lie, she protested. I was just managing the narrative. The narrative. His tone turned acidic. You told me you got a $15,000 bonus last Christmas. You lied to my face. Emma's posture crumbled. I didn't want you to be disappointed, she whispered. So instead, you let me believe Lucy was the disappointment, while she was literally paying for your life, he said, rising from his seat. His voice shook with fury and regret. Do you have any idea how many times I've said Lucy needed to grow up? How often I used you as the example of what she should become? It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so painful. Every designer dress he admired, every vacation photo, every illusion of success, it had all been paid for with profits from the business he thought was worthless. Emma was still crying, but it had shifted. This wasn't panic anymore. This was mourning for the image, the lifestyle, the validation she had lived for. I need details, Richard said, settling back down. Real ones. I want to understand what I've ignored. Emma looked between us, devastated. realizing his attention had shifted completely away from her illusion and toward the truth. I started Timber Trail 4 years ago. I saw a gap in the market. Camping gear was either cheap and useless or overpriced for rich hobbyists. So I found small manufacturers who made products for major brands. Most were happy to do private label deals. Richard leaned forward, listening, truly listening for the first time in my adult life. I created my own line, same quality, lower cost, about 60% of big brand retail, and people really buy it online. Outdoor recreation is a billion-dollar industry, I said. Most brands target casual campers or elite climbers. I found the middle serious hikers who want professional-grade gear without the price tag. Emma sat silent, her eyes red, scrolling through her phone like she was searching for a way to erase the last hour. But there was no rewind button. Dad, camping and hiking aren't just hobbies, they're billion-dollar industries, I explained. Most brands cater to Olympic-level athletes or people who hike once a year. I focus on the serious, in-between people who want top-tier gear without the luxury markup. Emma was glued to her phone, no longer hiding her panic. She was probably calculating how fast her carefully constructed world was collapsing. Meanwhile, I kept speaking. My average order is about $260. I process around 1,200 of those a month across platforms. After product costs, my gross margin sits at 40% before marketing and overhead. Richard's lips moved as he ran the numbers in his head. 1,200 orders times $260. That's over $300,000 a month. Times 12. $3.6 million gross in my peak year. I finished. Last year was less, but still strong. The realization finally landed. For years, he'd talked about me like I was some lost college kid playing games in my apartment, while I'd been running a multi-million-dollar business beneath his nose. "And where do you actually work from?" he asked, like he was trying to reimagine everything. "My apartment has a dedicated office, but logistics are outsourced. I handle planning, marketing, vendor relations, customer support while fulfillment runs through a warehouse in Commerce City." That's when Emma looked up, her face pale with desperation. "Lucy, my minimum payments on credit cards alone are almost $2,000. If you cut me off, I can't even make those." "Maybe you shouldn't have spent so much on status symbols," I said. "Or maybe you should have been honest instead of building an entire lifestyle that relied on a lie." She let out a strangled sob. "But what do I tell people? Everyone thinks I've made it." "Then tell them the truth," Richard snapped. "Tell them your image was paid for by the sister you and I both dismissed." He was finally seeing me. Every time he'd mocked my career, every time he'd told relatives I needed a real job, every time he'd praised Emma's empty titles, it all unraveled. "I need to call your Aunt Jennifer," he muttered. Emma's head jerked toward him. "Why?" "Because last month, I told her Lucy should follow your path, take a steady job. I told her your retail position was proof that traditional careers were more stable than entrepreneurship. Jennifer, a successful real estate developer, had always supported my path." I could only imagine the restraint it took for her to bite her tongue during that conversation. Emma was spiraling now, clicking away on her laptop. "Look at this place," she said, turning the screen. 600 square feet for $1,500, no dishwasher. "Welcome to reality," I said coolly. "Try living within your means." Richard hadn't spoken. He was still trying to process the truth of my business. "Lucy, when you said you worked from home, I imagined you in sweats, scrolling social media. I had no idea you were running something this real." "That's because you never asked," I said. "Every time I tried to explain, you cut me off with advice I didn't ask for." He looked embarrassed. "I thought I was helping, thought I was steering you toward something stable, like Emma." "You mean someone who lied about promotions, lived off credit, and let her sister foot the bill?" I asked. Emma slammed her laptop shut. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Lucy. I just wanted Dad to be proud. By making me the family disgrace," my voice cracked. "Do you know how many dinners I sat through while you accepted praise you didn't earn funded by my bank account?" Richard stood and paced to the window. "I owe you an apology. A real one." "It's not just about being sorry," I said. "It's about seeing the truth. You valued job titles and dress codes over actual achievement." He hesitated. "It just seemed more respectable." "That's the problem," I said. "You thought success had a look. Emma wore heels and carried a designer bag, so you assumed she had her life together. I wear hoodies and work from a laptop, So you assumed I was failing. Emma was crying again, but this time it wasn't for show. I never wanted it to go this far, she whispered. I thought I'd get a better job. I thought I could catch up. I didn't mean to. I just kept thinking next quarter, next year. You didn't fix anything, I said. You just spent more. Richard returned to the table, finally calm. So, what now? Now Emma learns to live on what she earns, and you both stop treating my company like a passing phase. And the money she owes you, he asked. I'd thought about that more than I cared to admit. It's an expensive lesson. I don't expect it back. But I won't be handing out any more support either. Emma's eyes lit with faint hope. So you're not angry about the money? I'm angry about the lies, I said. I chose to help, but I didn't choose to be used. I didn't choose to be the scapegoat while you pretended to be someone you weren't. Richard sat quietly. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Lucy, I want to understand your business, not to critique, just to understand, because clearly, I've been blind to what you've actually accomplished. For the first time all night, I smiled. 3 weeks later, I sat in my apartment office, watching my accounts grow instead of shrink. The money I used to send to Emma now fueled international expansion. My brand was entering European markets, and results were already pouring in. Emma had moved into a modest one-bedroom, 15 minutes from her store. She sold off most of her designer wardrobe to pay her creditors. Richard told me she'd picked up extra shifts just to stay afloat. But the real reward wasn't watching Emma finally face reality. It was watching Richard, my father, come to terms with how wrong he'd been. Since that dinner, he called me regularly, not with lectures, but with genuine curiosity. He asked about marketing strategies, logistics partners, scaling margins. For the first time in my life, he wasn't just hearing me. He was listening. He wasn't asking out of skepticism anymore. There were no critiques, no backhanded suggestions, just genuine curiosity. For the first time, my father truly wanted to understand what I had built, and how he had missed it. I told Jennifer about your actual revenue, Richard admitted during one of our recent calls. She laughed at me for 20 minutes straight. Of course she did. Aunt Jennifer always knew you were underestimating me, I replied. She said she tried to tell me more than once, he said, his voice carrying the weight of realization. But I wouldn't listen. She said I was being an arrogant fool who couldn't recognize success unless it looked exactly how I pictured it. That sounded exactly like something she would say. Jennifer never sugarcoated truth, not even for family. Especially not for family. The worst part, Richard continued, is thinking about how many people I told you needed to get your act together. How many times I bragged about Emma's fake promotions. Now I have to explain that everything I believed was wrong. His entire perspective had flipped. The daughter he dismissed had quietly built an empire, and the one he idolized was living a fiction funded by someone else. Everything he thought he knew about his children was now inverted. But the most public unraveling wasn't in our living room. It was online. Emma's carefully curated social media, life full of luxury dinners, designer outfits, and staged success, began collapsing the second I cut the funding. Without the cash flow, the content stream dried up. She couldn't afford the pieces that completed the image. The glossy posts stopped. Her penthouse was replaced by a cramped studio that didn't photograph well. Followers noticed. The comments changed. Where are you? Are you okay? Something feels different. She tried to keep up appearances, recycling old posts and using filters to hide the cracks. But truth has a way of surfacing. The final blow came when a former coworker, someone she had once bragged to, left a public comment asking about the promotion she'd been supposedly celebrating for months. Emma's illusion shattered. Her accounts went private, then silent. Meanwhile, Richard began telling the truth. Slowly, hesitantly, but he told it. He admitted he had been wrong about both of us. It wasn't easy for him, but he seemed determined to finally give credit where it was due. I'm proud of what you built, he told me one evening. And I'm ashamed I didn't see it sooner. It was right in front of me. Those words meant more than any bank deposit. Emma's return to reality was more brutal than any of us expected. 6 months after I stopped supporting her, she filed for bankruptcy. Her car was repossessed. Her wardrobe sold piece by piece to cover debts. She ended up in a nearly empty studio, the echo of her former life haunting the walls. Her audience, once so captivated by her glamour, drifted away. Friends stopped inviting her to high-end gatherings. Dating became complicated. People expected the version of her they'd seen online, not the one now clinging to survival. Richard faced his own reckoning. Family, friends, neighbors, they all heard. The man who spent years criticizing the daughter, who built a thriving business, while praising the one living a lie, had to own up to it. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was a humbling collapse of everything he thought defined success. And as I poured that newly reclaimed $4,000 a month into expanding Timber Trail into European markets, I realized something. All those years of dismissal, the eye rolls, the subtle digs, they hadn't broken me, they'd fueled me. They pushed me to build something unshakable, something undeniable. And in the end, the sweetest victory wasn't Emma's downfall. It wasn't even the profits or the expansion. It was watching Richard finally recognize what I had built, while he was too busy looking elsewhere. It was realizing that the most powerful revenge doesn't require shouting. It just requires letting the truth speak louder than the lies that once defined you.